In the grand tapestry of history, revolutions often bear names soaked in blood, fire, and the weight of political gravitas. But not every uprising was about thrones or taxes. Some were about something far humbler, something spreadable, something golden and creamy. In a corner of Europe, nestled between larger empires and great dynasties, one peculiar rebellion took place that would make every toast lover lean in with curiosity. This was not a battle over sovereignty. It was the Butter Rebellion, a moment in time when peasants rose up and did the unthinkable. They stole the king's butter. It is the 18th century, and across the hills of Central Europe, a small kingdom lies quiet under the rule of a monarch with extravagant tastes. His court is dripping in excess. Feathered wigs, gold-threaded waistcoats, chandeliers with more crystal than common sense. But the king's favorite indulgence is not pearls or perfume. It is butter. Not the grainy, homemade kind you churn in a wooden barrel. This was triple-churned, cream-fed, herbed, perfumed butter. The kind that sat on golden platters. Kind that was never meant to touch the calloused hands of peasants. Butter, in this era, was more than just food. It was power. It was proof of wealth, refinement, and divine right. Butter was reserved for nobility. In some regions, commoners were even forbidden from making it, under the ridiculous claim that butter-making disturbed the spiritual purity of the land. Instead, peasants were left with lard, dripping, and the occasional spoonful of spoiled goat cream. Yet they labored endlessly supplying the cows, the cream, the labor that fueled the monarch's gluttonous delight. As with all great injustices, this butter monopoly eventually churned up trouble. In the village of Bruttendorf, a quiet cluster of thatched roofs beneath the castle walls, the first whispers began. The villagers were starving, not of calories, but of dignity. Every morning, a line of servants would descend from the royal kitchens to collect fresh cream from the village cows. Cream taken without pay, butter made in the castle kitchens, plated onto royal bread, while children in the village gnawed on dry root and beet peel. The final straw was as ridiculous as it was infuriating. During the royal spring banquet, the king ordered a monumental butter sculpture. A life-size replica of himself, astride a horse, carved entirely out of butter. To preserve its shape, the sculpture was housed in a cool cellar, filled with blocks of ice, imported at great cost from a mountain hundreds of miles away. All the while, peasants in Bruttendorf had not seen butter in years. One morning, a farm girl named Ilse stumbled across a broken servant's cart on the edge of the village. It was carrying a small barrel of cream, destined for the royal kitchens. She looked around. The road was empty. She hesitated only for a moment before she dipped her hand in. What she tasted changed everything. This was not the sour scrapings of their village pails. This was heaven, and she could not let it go. Ilse's little act of defiance sparked something dangerous. That night, she gathered a few neighbors and told them what she'd done. They laughed at first. Then they asked for a taste. Then they made a plan. The villagers, long accustomed to sneaking in and out of the castle grounds for their chores, began smuggling out butter, not for profit. Not to sell, but to eat. To taste what had been denied them. To spread it thick on hard brown bread and lick their fingers like kings. The operation grew. Butter vanished from royal pantries. The sculpture began to shrink mysteriously. One of the palace cooks suspected rodents, until a trail of muddy footprints led them to a servant girl with creamy fingers and a suspicious smile. When the king discovered what was happening, he exploded in fury. This was not merely theft. It was treason. It was a violation of divine order. He ordered a crackdown. Punishments were brutal. Servants were whipped. Villagers were arrested. But this only poured fuel onto the fire. The Butter Rebellion was born. The villagers refused to send cream to the palace. They blocked the roads, they barricaded dairies, churned their own butter openly in defiance. In every cottage, a small revolution was underway. People who had never dared to question their place in the world now sat at tables slathering forbidden butter on stale rye bread, raising their mugs and mock toasts to the king. The rebellion spread. Neighboring villages joined in. Word traveled through traveling monks and peddlers. Songs were sung. The most famous went, "You may take my cow, you may take my calf, but leave me my butter, and let me laugh." There were no swords drawn, no castles stormed, but the damage to royal pride was immense. The king tried to rally his court. He even issued a proclamation declaring butter a sacred royal food, too pure for peasant consumption. But by then, the villagers were done with declarations. They were busy making biscuits. One nobleman attempted to appease the villagers by offering a single communal butter feast in the village square, thinking this would end the unrest. Instead, the peasants laughed in his face and dumped the butter into the river. They didn't want charity, wanted justice. They wanted butter that didn't come with chains. In one now legendary event, a group of peasants stormed the royal pantry not with pitchforks, but with loaves of bread. They sat in the marble-floored kitchen and held a silent protest, eating buttered bread by candlelight, refusing to leave until the royal chefs joined them. And surprisingly, a few did. Eventually, the rebellion ground down the kingdom's resolve. The economy suffered. Butter shortages at court became an embarrassment. Foreign dignitaries joked about the king with no spread. Finally, under pressure from his advisors, the king issued an edict that changed everything. Butter, he declared, was no longer a royal exclusive. Peasants were allowed to make, sell, and eat butter freely. The law was signed with a gold pen and sealed with wax, and perhaps just a little bit of remorse. The rebellion, in all its unlikely glory, had won. What followed was something of a golden age for dairy in the kingdom. Butter making exploded. New techniques were invented. Villagers experimented with herbs, salt, even berries. Butter became not just food but culture. Every household had its own style. Festivals were held with butter tasting contests. Recipes were shared like secrets. Ilsa, the farm girl who first dipped her fingers in royal cream, became a local legend. She opened the first peasant-run butter market and was known as the Queen of the Cream. Of course, history often forgets rebellions that do not spill blood. The butter rebellion rarely makes it into textbooks. It is not taught in schools. But in the kitchens of Brettendorf, the story lives on. Passed down from grandmother to child over warm bread and butter, it is a story of dignity, of hunger not just for food but for fairness. A story about how something as small as a smear of butter can symbolize something enormous: freedom, equality, the right to enjoy life's simple pleasures. So next time you butter your toast, pause for a second. Somewhere in a quiet village centuries ago, someone risked everything just for that luxury, and they won. Not with swords, but with spoons. Not with speeches, but with spread. So now you know the incredible tale of the Butter Rebellion. Revolt not fought with swords or fire, but with churns, bread, and bold defiance. What started as a single stolen taste turned into a full-blown movement. One that challenged royal privilege and brought a kingdom's most treasured delicacy into the hands of the people who actually made it. These villagers didn't rise up to conquer land or seize thrones. They just wanted a taste of what they had been denied for generations. And in doing so, they made history in the most delicious way possible. If this story left you smiling, hungry, or just a little more curious about the odd corners of history, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. We've got plenty more strange and savory tales where this came from. Drop a comment below and let us know what food you'd be willing to rebel for. Was it worth it for the peasants? Absolutely. They didn't just steal butter, they spread a revolution. Thanks for watching, and until next time, may your bread be warm and your butter freely spread.